Taking the STAR test, our goal is to find keywords that help us know how to solve a problem or what the question is asking for. So today's keywords are going to be slope and rate of change. So these two sets of words actually mean the exact same thing. Rate of change is the exact same thing as slope. So if you know how to find slope, if you see a question and it says rate of change, you know how to do that as well. They're the exact same thing. So if you remember nothing else from this video, remember that rate of change is the exact same thing as slope. They're both represented by the letter M, which we'll talk a little bit more about when we go look at our formula chart for STAR. So when we're on the STAR test, there are two methods that we can use when we see the word slope or rate of change. We have what's called a slope formula that actually helps us calculate the slope more by hand. We'll use the calculator, but it's a formula that we plug numbers into. So I'm not going to go over this too much because you likely already talked about this in your Algebra 1 class at some point, or you've seen this at some point before. Regression is the second method we're going to talk about, which is a newer method that you might not have ever seen before taking this class. So this helps us 100% use our calculator and is a more accurate way to do it. It's a lot easier to mess up using the slope formula than it is to mess up using regression. So if you're not feeling confident about the slope formula, I highly recommend this regression method. So just a quick review, the slope formula requires you to find at least 2 points because the slope is the rate of change between 2 points. So we want to know how much is the graph increasing or decreasing. We need at least 2 points in order to see that increase or decrease. And then we're going to plug x and y values into the slope formula from the formula chart. So what that is referring to is this formula chart that you get on your STAR test. So when you take your STAR test, all of these formulas are given to you. And if we zoom in down here, we see a formula for the slope of a line or the rate of change of a line. And it gives us this formula. So if we're able to find x1, x2, y1, y2, and just plug it in, we're able to actually solve the problem. So what you've done in the past when solving slope, let's look at a question over here, is let's say I give you 2 points. You label them x1 and y1 for point number 1, and then x2 and y2 for point number 2. And then we're able to plug them in to this formula that they gave us, and we can actually use Desmos for that. So if you don't know, when you hit the division symbol, it actually pops up with that line. So if we pop up with y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, when we plug that in, we do y2, which is 18, minus y1, which is negative 9, all over x2, which is 7, minus x1, which is negative 11. We get 1.5. We can hit this fraction symbol right here, and it'll convert it depending on what the answer choices look like. And that is one way to find your slope. If you did not follow that method, and that's not a method that you are familiar with or comfortable with, then we're going to use regression instead. So regression method, first step is still exactly the same. We need at least 2 points because to find the rate of change in general, you need 2 points. Then we're going to go to our Desmos calculator, and step 3 tells us to click the plus sign and add a new table. So we're going to click plus and add a new table. Notice that x1 and y1 automatically popped up here. If a different number pops up, like if you have multiple tables on your screen, this could say 2, 3, 4. Make sure you go in and you change these to say x1 and y1. It's very important when we're using this formula. And then it says plug in at least 2 points. So we're going to add in our 2 points that it gave us. So let's go back to this problem. We're going to add in the point negative 11, negative 9, and then 7, 18. And we see our 2 red dots pop up. So we're trying to figure out what is the rate of change between these 2 points. How we can do that is we can actually get the calculator to write an equation of a line for us that goes through those 2 points. And then we can very easily see the slope with that equation. So what we need is we need to write the equation of a line. So that's where step 3 is getting this crazy formula, y1 squiggly mx1 plus b. We need to plug that in. The reason that formula is the way it is, just so you remember it better on your STAR test, is if we look at our formula chart, if we look at the slope-intercept form of a line, it's y equals mx plus b. And a quick reminder, in case you don't remember, m represents the slope and b represents the y-intercept. So if I can get my calculator to write me an equation in y equals mx plus b form, if it can find m and b for me, then I'll know the slope and the y-intercept. So no matter what the question is asking me, I'll have the answer for it. But when I go to my calculator, if I just type y equals mx plus b, I get this error message right here. This little triangle means that something's wrong. It's not working. Whatever's in that line is not working properly. So the reason that it's not working properly is a couple things. One, it doesn't know what x and y are. It's trying to pull those points from the table, but the x and y here don't match the table up here. Because up here my table says x1 and y1. So the first thing I want to fix is adding in my x1 and y1. And notice here I'm still seeing that error message. That's because regression is an approximation. It is not actually technically equal to. So what we have to do is change the symbol from an equal sign to this squiggly line that means approximate. So it's still y equals mx plus b, just with a couple modifications. But notice here now, if you look right down here, we've got m equals 1.5. We can ignore all the r. You're not going to need any of the r for Algebra 1. So m equals 1.5, and it also told us that b is equal to 7.5. And if we look at our formula chart, y equals mx plus b, we found slope and y-intercept. And we could actually write the equation now. We could have y equals 1.5x plus 7.5, which you might see questions that ask that as well. But more likely than not, it's really just going to ask for the rate of change. So this question did ask for the rate of change. And the rate of change is m, which is slope. It's the same thing. So it's just 1.5. And when we do these problems, sometimes you'll see it in fraction form. So if that's the case, you can just type your slope into the next line, hit that little fraction symbol, and it'll convert it for us. So the slope is 1.5 or 3 over 2 for this problem. So there's lots of things that regression can do. It can find you the slope, it can find you the y-intercept, or it can actually write the equation for you. So if we see slope or rate of change in the question, no matter what, we're going to try this method. We're going to try to get the points into a table, type our formula, and see if we can find m and b that way. Before we end this lesson, I do want to mention that not all the questions will give you the points like this question did. So this question just straight up said these are the 2 points. That's not always the case. We could see questions like these. So we could see questions that have a graph that we have to find 2 points. So this point would be 1, 1. And this point would be 2, negative 2. So now we have our 2 points, and we could plug it into our table the same exact way. Another type of question we could see is vertical tables, where x is on the left and y is on the right. But again, we just pluck out 2 points. So we would have 0, 20, and you can add in the decimals. And then we just pick any other point that we want. So we've got 15, 151, 25. And those are our 2 points that we plug in. And then lastly, we can have these horizontal tables where x is on top and y is on bottom. But same thing, we pick 2 points. So we've got 1 point, which is 110. And we've got another point, which could be 324. And we can add more than 2 points, but you just need at least 2. So you can add the whole table, or you can just add 2 and then do the trick, whatever you prefer. And that is it. So just a quick review. If we see the word slope or rate of change anywhere inside of a star problem, unless we feel really comfortable with the slope formula. So if you feel really comfortable with the slope formula, you can use that method. However, I suggest using the regression formula for a couple of reasons. One, you'll make less mistakes. Two, it actually finds your slope and your y-intercept. So no matter what the question is asking for, you find 2 things versus your slope formula will only find the slope.